Welcome to Real Talk with Sarah. Today we are talking about something that we hear about, but perhaps we don't take seriously enough. We're talking about traumatic brain injury, or TBI. When I say traumatic brain injury, it sounds so much more serious than concussion. But receiving a concussion is a traumatic brain injury, and it is serious business. If you or a loved one has suffered a concussion and you're feeling overwhelmed with where to start, or if you want to know how to manage the symptoms of post-concussion syndrome, then this is the show for you. Living with a concussion is not easy, but there are so many resources and therapies out there to help, and my guests today want to point you in the right direction. I've got entrepreneur and mom Lisa Cara with me to share her personal story of receiving a concussion and how she's been able to heal. And later, I'll have Karen Manet, owner of Opticom, with how she helps her patients dealing with visual stress caused by concussions. She'll also share her top tips on post-concussion management, as well as other therapies that can help. So here we go. Episode 10 of Real Talk with Sarah starts right now. The day my first guest's life changed was a day like any other. And for so many who suffer a concussion, that's the way it goes. Doing something totally normal, not playing football or engaging in dangerous behaviors, but simply going about the business of life, and bam, life changes on a dime. I'm so pleased that Lisa Cara has been able to free herself from her symptoms, but it's not been an easy journey. She's here to help us understand concussion better and what we can do to heal it and learn from it if it happens. Welcome, Lisa.
Thank you so much for having me.
I'm so happy to have you here to talk about a topic that I really don't think enough of us know really anything about unless we've experienced it. So I'd love to start with a little bit of a definition. What is a concussion?
Definitely. So a concussion is termed a mild traumatic brain injury, but definitely I would say there's nothing really mild about it, right? Your life changes in an instant. So traumatic brain injury, mild traumatic brain injury, it's an injury to the brain. It can be from a whiplash type injury, a blow to the head, a fall, being near like really explosive, like a shockwave kind of thing. Anything, if you think of your brain being like jello inside, or your brain inside your skull being like jello, so any type of like impact where there's that forward back can cause a concussion. Mm-hmm. And then dealing with post-concussion after is all the lingering symptoms that keep lingering on, which can sometimes feel like forever,
yes.
That you really have to take seriously.
Yeah, and mm-hmm. everyone's concussion, like you kind of touched on, everyone's concussion is different. Whoever experiences a concussion, there aren't sort of a specific set of symptoms that we can look to and say, oh, that's concussion. But why don't we get into your story? Why don't you share with us what happened back almost 2 years ago?
Sure, yeah, definitely. It was October 2016, so I'm a busy mom of two. I'm a Pilates studio owner at Imbalance Pilates. So used to being very busy. I went to clear off some leaves and went into my garage. I stepped on that heavy flat rake. It was leaning against my wall, wasn't put away properly. And so I stepped on that out of the blue, didn't even know what hit me, and it kind of clocked me in the head like a bat. So I at first, and then of course I would have definitely gone forward and back, quite suddenly, because I didn't know what was in my garage or what had really happened.
So we're talking one of those really heavy rakes.
Yes, that flat rake that was leaning against the wall. So really heavy rake, not just the flimsy one. Mm-hmm. And but of course that's kind of like a cartoon injury, right? Like we've seen that on all the cartoons, slapstick comedy. You step on a rake, right? And I had a huge goose egg, and really just thought, okay, I have this goose egg. That was it. Went to work that night, taught a few classes. The next day I had my regular, about 6 people in a row, and was wondering why I wasn't able to spit out my words correctly. So I was having that word finding difficulty the next day. Okay. Headaches and pain, but again, I had a huge goose egg on my head. So I just thought it was that. Didn't seek any medical attention. And then several days later, when I was really feeling like there was kind of these bugs crawling on my head and someone was pulling my hair, and I have young kids, so I just kind of thought to myself, is there like head lice in our house? What's going on?
Wow.
Which we've never had to deal with that, but you know what I mean? There's all these symptoms that I had never had migraines or headaches of any sort, so it was all very new to me,
So
right?
you were experiencing headaches.
Headaches, that drunk feeling, that feeling of dizziness, unbalanced, fogginess, the whole memory problems, word finding problems, and in an instant, right? And then it progressively got worse over the next few days. By the following week, when I saw my family doctor again, she at that point had said, go into the dark room for 48 hours and you're doing nothing. Get up to go to the washroom, that's it. And it was kind of at that point that my husband, I mean, he's been unbelievably supportive through the whole thing, thankfully. I wouldn't have the energy and desire to want to help others to the extent that I do if I didn't have that support system. Yeah. So he had even said recently, seeing you in that room and not being able to spit your words out properly, and he just kind of felt like, okay, this is go time to just step in and help. So luckily I had that support. Yeah. Because I myself didn't realize the severity of it.
And so did your doctor diagnose you with a concussion when you went in? Like
yes.
she said, this is definitely a concussion.
Yes.
You need to. Okay.
Yes.
And so was there a test that she did to confirm?
The different things with the, taking the pen to your eyes to see how your eye tracking is moving, and different things with eye movements and balance and a bit of nerve testing.
Okay, so there was no doubt that this was a concussion right out of the gate. Okay.
That's right. And so that was it. So my main thing at the beginning was, yes, I took time off of seeing my clients, but because I was so busy and a business owner, I kind of thought, okay, I'm told to take some time off. So I took time off with clients, but I really didn't take it serious in that I was still on my phone. I was still doing things that I probably should have taken more of a break.
And from what I've learned, and maybe you can help me to understand, those first 48 hours are so crucial. And
yes.
because you got the goose egg and just
yes.
figured this is a cartoon,
yes.
who
yes.
does this? And then you saw clients that night.
And the next day,
Yeah.
I mean, a big thing with it that comes into it is the whole mom guilt. The next day I had my 6 clients in a row, went back home, to get my kids, saw another client, and then took the kids to a school dance, because in my opinion there was no way I was saying no to my children. We had our heart set on going to this school dance. I have a goose egg, we'll deal with it, kind of thing. So the one main thing is, no 2 brain injuries are the same. You've seen one, that's it. So therefore you really have to take it seriously.
Okay.
You have to take that pacing break, get off your phone, get off the screen time. Yeah. Everyone is different in terms of what affects them. So for in terms of what flares them up and what symptoms. So for myself, it was definitely a vision problem. I did see a vision therapist for a good 1.5 years. So my thing was this whole focal binding. So my vision system was wanting to really focus on the details instead of taking in the periphery. So anytime you're in a room and then, several people come into the room and there's a lot of action in the periphery, that would really flare things up. So that's why teaching groups and things like that was kind of out of the question at that point. Yeah. So taking it serious is very, very important, especially, as a colleague, as an employer, as a parent, if your child gets hurt on the playground, you have to, I don't care what meetings you have the next day, be home with that child, make sure they're not getting injured in any other way, because that whole second impact syndrome, when you have hit your head and got a concussion, and then if you happen to fall or get another concussion early in that time, everything's just compounded in terms of how long it's going to take to get better.
Wow.
Symptoms. Mm-hmm.
So I was going to say, so you didn't know that it was a concussion, and I think that's what I really want to get across in this episode, is just that if you think it might be, if you have hit your head, if you have experienced whiplash, if something has happened to your head and you're not feeling well, or even like you were saying with a child, do you recommend right away getting them into the doctor to find out if it is a concussion, and if so, they need to be in a quiet, dark room and taking that time right away?
I would say seek medical help and then go from there. Okay. I mean, some people you'll get diagnosed at the beginning, some people you won't. When you go to the hospital for a scan, they're usually just looking for a brain bleed or fracture. So the changes that occur in the brain with post-concussion are not shown on just a regular MRI, CT scan.
Okay.
So kind of like looking for a certain test isn't always going to be your answer.
So maybe taking it seriously whenever anybody's, you know, if you're a parent with a child or yourself, and then monitoring yourself to see what's going on and get off screens in the meantime in case it is a concussion. And you know, my girlfriend, she went to Canada's Wonderland a few days later, not realizing that she had gotten a concussion. So really looking back, she was like, oh my gosh, that was not a good decision to go. And I mean, certainly after the first ride, she realized that there was an issue there, so she didn't continue with rides. But I think this is really important information for people to know. If you have hit your head, if something has happened or with your child, definitely take it seriously. And then if there are some symptoms like blurred vision, fumbling with words, dizziness, headaches, that kind of thing, then of course get to the doctor.
Exactly. Okay. Seeking physio, seeking vision therapy, massage therapy, whatever.
Well, and I was going to ask, so keep walking us through your story, and then I want to find out what were the therapies that really worked for you.
Sure. So I continued to have some other people cover my classes. I tried to just see some private clients here and there. My biggest thing, I mean, with a concussion, you suddenly lose so many abilities, right? Let's say whether it's job abilities, career abilities, things you're doing at home, just the mere ability to go to 3 stores in one day to get all your ingredients for something, right? Like that goes out the window. Wow. There's no, you really have to be mindful of pacing yourself. You know, if you're doing something for 2 hours one day, having to take out a bunch of things the day before and the day after. So learning how to pace, being really in tune with yourself for how your body feels, and then work with that. So eventually I did have to move my studio to my home. So I did have a brick and mortar. So that was the worst part of this whole ordeal, was having just the grief of having to downsize a business. Through it now, and happy that I have it at home. I also, throughout the time, was able to get accepted into a book. So for my thing, because I was I placed a lot of value in being a Pilates instructor and a studio owner, so it was quite just so many changes at once. So getting that book deal and being able to do that, be a best-selling author, was such a sanity saver. And I always say the creativity kept me sane and strong, because if I were to have just closed my business and not have had another cool career path to try out, I can't imagine,
Well, and I know that you and I have talked about the fact that you felt like it was your whole world ending when you had to close your brick and mortar, where where everything was changing, and you were feeling like pieces of your life, you were just losing them, step by step. Just pieces of your life were falling away because of this concussion, and the anger and frustration and that feeling of powerlessness over it. So the one thing that you really were able to do, you got approached to be a contributor in the best-selling book Women Who Inspire, and that really helped keep you feeling motivated. And
it really did. And
it helped you feel productive, and like you weren't losing everything, that you were still able to do something.
Exactly. And I mean, it was very tough to do all of the, social media stuff. It definitely wasn't easy to be present online and that kind of thing, but I knew that it would be worth it, and that kind of thing. So it was a lot of changes, and definitely having to keep your mind just looking for the positive. My big thing is, this didn't happen to me, it happened for me.
I love that saying. You've said that to me so many times, and I feel that way in all of life. Things don't happen to us, right? They happen for us. There are lessons inside of everything. But when you're going through a crisis like this, when your whole life is falling apart, you're having to close a business. I'm sure you were concerned about finances, where all of a sudden, this is
and you have no idea how long it will last. No physician, no doctor can tell you. I had seen a neurologist last January, and he said, I really just feel like suddenly it's going to be kind of like a dimmer switch is going to turn back on. And it was not the best advice at the time, because you're thinking, can't you give me any more? Like you have no idea how long it's going to last and when you're going to get better.
So there is no telling depending on how hard you were hit on the head, or
That's
lightly
right.
you were hit on the head,
That's
or if it
right.
was whiplash.
That's right.
There is no telling how long this concussion
right.
will last. It's
That's
just
right.
everyone is different.
That's right. And
Wow.
I mean, I wished it could have been a case of just work harder, push harder. That is the worst thing you can do.
Yeah.
And the big thing about concussions and post-concussions is it is an invisible illness. So people do not see that, you know, something's wrong. Oh, you look great. Oh, you went to that dinner last week. She must be getting better. And the thing with invisible illness is, you know, you think of someone with they've broken their leg, they have a cast, they have crutches, right? We can see that there's an injury. We wouldn't tell them to take their cast off, ditch their crutches, and run harder.
Honestly.
Right? But with a brain, like, you only have one brain, and you absolutely have to take it serious, and you have to, if you know someone that has one, just offering up more compassion, more help, more just understanding.
I really think that's such an important piece of the message that we wanted to achieve tonight. When you and I talked before the show, it was like, what do we really want to get across? And that was a big part of it for the rest of us to have more kindness and compassion towards people that are walking around with invisible illnesses, because you might want to say, like you were saying, we saw you last week at that party. Why can't you come to this event? Or why can't you be at work? And that's the other thing. There isn't anything, as far as I understand, in the healthcare system that provides free healthcare or provides for you to be able to go back to work and have some type of cover for the money that you're losing if you rely on your job.
That's right.
To feed
and
yourself.
Self-employed at the same time. That's a whole
Which
other
was your
ball
story.
game. And that's why I know for myself, I pushed myself so much, because being self-employed, you're just still, there's bills that are there. And so there's definitely that financial kind of trauma aspect that comes into play as well. So yeah, just really being honest with yourself, with where you can push yourself and where you can't, and where you need to take a break. And that's definitely a huge part of it. Just being kind. If you have a colleague that's had one, understand that they're not making an excuse. They're not using this as an excuse. If you know, they're on the computer for an hour and a half and they have to stop, they have to stop. It's not about, I find people can be very, very quick to judge with the whole invisible illness thing. And so yeah, just having more compassion and kindness towards anyone going through anything.
Absolutely. Anyone going through anything.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah.
Tell us, we have about a minute before we have to go to break. You mentioned Pilates, of course, that you do, and visual therapy, vision therapy. What other treatments did you follow?
So yeah, definitely Pilates, meditation, mindfulness, yoga, massage therapy, vision therapy. I saw physiotherapy as well. And
that's the thing.
Those helped.
Not all of these are covered. Most of these are not covered.
No,
So
and I
that's
mean
other
the
thing.
energy just to go to these appointments, right? Because again, you don't realize how fatiguing it is to just be doing these things, right? So anything, self-care is huge, big into that. Just anything where you're, can be more in tune with yourself, how you're feeling, where you need to take a break and take a step back and be honest with yourself and compassionate with yourself, because it can be, as I said, when you have no idea how long it's going to last, you just have to pace it.
Absolutely. Well, next, Lisa will share her tips on staying productive while dealing with a concussion. Back in a moment. Welcome back to Real Talk. I've got Lisa Cara with me, helping us to understand concussions better, and she's about to share her top tips that kept her from slipping into depression. I imagine that's a huge issue for people. Their whole life has changed. Your whole life changed. How did you not slip into depression?
Yeah, depression, anxiety, all the different emotional feelings can be very heavy. And as I said, for myself, with the grief of closing a business, downsizing a business, heavy. My main thing is the whole if you've seen one brain injury, you've seen one brain injury, right? So that's for yourself, that's for taking care of another person. So you just need to stop and think about how you're feeling, how you need to pace. And for, you know, if you have a colleague at work, if you have two colleagues at work, one's had a car accident, one had something else, you can't compare. So again, the whole try not to judge how long something's taking for one person versus another, and be compassionate with yourself on that as well, because you just never know. And there can be, you know, 2 steps forward, 2 steps back. It really depends on pacing and that.
So that's your first tip, is to be kind to yourself.
Be kind to yourself,
yes,
and others that you know that have had a brain injury.
Definitely.
Yep.
All right, what's your second tip? I've got it here. Take it seriously.
Yes, you absolutely have to take it seriously. As I mentioned at the beginning of mine, I kept working hard. I did take time off of clients, but you absolutely have to take it serious. So whether it is yourself, a family member, a friend, a colleague, they have to take it seriously. They have to know when to take a break and listen to their body. And yeah, bottom line, it's you have one brain, and that's it.
One brain.
One brain.
One life, but one brain.
Yes.
And honestly, we really do need to protect it. And like I said at the top of the hour, that this isn't for people that necessarily are playing football and doing things. This is, we could, any one of us can suffer a concussion. All right, tip number 3, do what feels productive for you.
Definitely. So with it being such a life-changing event and stripping away so many things that you used to be able to do with absolutely no problem, not a second thought. So just, being able to realize what things feel very easy and light and comfortable to do. So whether it's, you know, trying to cook a meal or trying to do this, trying to do that, whatever feels good and light and easy, do those things. So the things you kind of radiate towards that feel okay to do them, because there's a lot of confidence and self-confidence that you're building in yourself to be able to do those baby steps, right? So to be able to acknowledge your successes, those small successes, and go from there.
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. And then the next tip, reframe your mindset. What does that mean?
Yeah, so as I mentioned before about that this didn't happen to me, it happened for me. So just, you have to look on the bright side. Obviously, we can't in every single moment. I'm huge into law of attraction, and you know, the words we speak are what kind of comes back to us. But yeah, you really have to look for the positive things that you were able to do that day, the good days that you have, and just really focus on intentions, visualizations. Let's say you have something to go to that usually really triggers things. Being able to visualize that that's going to be okay, you're going to feel fine the next day, really taking that kind of just mental positivity into play can help for certain things. It's certainly not a mind over matter all the time, but being able to cope with certain functions or certain daily things that you have to get through, like putting that visualization into it.
So are you saying that like every day is different? Like you wake up and every day, like some days you might be able to do some activities and other days you just can't do those things.
Definitely. And some days you just don't want to miss out and you really want to go to that thing. So, you know, I mean, for myself, I didn't travel in the car for like a year and a half because I have kids and a family to take care of. So you have to weigh out what you're doing and what you do this day and that day, and just again be kind to yourself and
so can
take
you
it one day at a time.
One day at a time. So can you then end up setting yourself back if you say, I want to go to this party, I really don't want to miss it?
Yes.
Is there a point to be made? Do not go to that party?
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah. At times, you really have to. I mean, I've had people reach out to me, strangers that have been, you know, it's that day where I can't go to my friend's wedding. And like weekly, I have people reach out with just different aspects of it that they're struggling with. Aside from, you know, I didn't have an employer rushing me back to work, but I mean, the people that deal with you know, WSIB and workers things and, you know, their employers doubting things. It's such a mental, it's so tough to get through. And when you have people that you feel like aren't even believing how you're feeling, like it just adds such another layer. So always we can stay positive and focused on just getting better and healing and being available for better health.
Oh my gosh, well, talking about better health, thank goodness you do the work you do, because your final tip is Pilates, yoga, meditation really helped you. Tell us how.
Definitely. They're a major non-negotiable. So especially with Pilates in terms of posture, because it helps so much with posture, deep breathing, stress relief. A lot of times if your neck, if you're having some cervical spine issues and postural issues, you can really exacerbate concussion symptoms. So just being mindful of posture and things like that. Making exercise a non-negotiable because of endorphins, meditation. I was lucky enough to get into the Love Your Brain program, so that's the yoga classes offered at Pranashanti. Being in a room full of people that get you, that not one person is wondering or judging, like that was life-changing. I remember having a student in there that said, you know, this is the first time I've been in a room with people that understand it. So reach out to people, get support, talk to someone that's gone through it.
Amazing. And I know you have an online course that you offer on your website as well.
Yes.
Where can people find out more about you?
Yes, definitely. So at www.inbalancepilates.ca, and it's called Healthy Brain and Optimal Posture. So it's an online course. You can go at your own pace. And
amazing. Thank you so much for being here, Lisa.
Thank you so much.
Oh my goodness. When we come back, I'll have Karen Monet with me to talk about visual stress. Back in a moment. Welcome back to Real Talk with Sarah. We're talking about concussions in this show, and I've got visual stress expert Karen Monet with me to share how concussion affects people's vision and how therapy can help. Welcome, Karen.
Thank you very much for having me. I really appreciate it.
I really appreciate you. We've been friends for a while now.
We have.
And I love what you do, and I really still don't know enough about it, so I really wanted to have you on to find out what the heck do you do and how does it work. So talk about visual stress, and I know that Lisa talked about the fact that she really dealt with some visual stress in the beginning of her concussion. How does it work? What happens?
So visual stress is a neurological condition. Now the word visual, you may think it has something to do with the eyes, but it doesn't. It has to do with the visual cortex. So back here where the visual cortex is. And visual stress, people who suffer from it have a sensitivity to visual information, specifically patterns, light, movement, and sometimes colors. And when they're sensitive to this visual imagery, the brain hyperactivates. So it gets overheated and it doesn't work properly. And unfortunately, that means they may see things improperly, they may misperceive, floors may look like they're moving, they might have blurriness, and from that, headaches and strain and vestibular issues.
So we're focusing on concussion in this show, but this can happen, anyone can have visual stress?
About 20% of the population suffers, but it's on a spectrum. So those who are in the lower 5% are managing their visual stress by maybe taking out their fluorescent lights, reading on a Kobo, doing things like putting dimmers on their light switches, doing things that they just do naturally without realizing, and that's good enough. The top 5% are the ones where we see in the clinic, those that have severe migraines, post-concussion vision issues, autism, attention difficulties, and learning difficulties. These are the individuals who really have a hard time with this visual information, and the side effects of blurriness, movement. One of the main things, the main symptoms, the diagnostic indicators, is seeing perceptual distortions in your environment. So it could be words are moving on the page, or when you're walking down a hallway with a pattern floor, it might look like it's moving and lead to sort of vestibular issues and dizziness and nausea. These things lead to headaches because you're straining to see through these visual images, and it's pretty frustrating for people who suffer.
I can only imagine. I'm just wondering, so would this be an indication of a concussion when you start to have these issues, or would you already know that you have a concussion and this is just part of the way that your symptoms are working?
The two conditions are separate. Having a concussion has its own symptoms. Many of those sound a lot like the symptoms of visual stress. So it's important to understand both, because you could be trying to treat the concussion symptoms, not realizing that it could be visual stress, and simply modifying the environment, modifying the lighting, using filters to filter the visual image can help with those symptoms. But the concussion symptoms that people first have are often headache, light sensitivity, difficulties with excess noise and movement, and these things often sort themselves out. 85% of the people who have a concussion, it's alleviated, it's gone within the first 3 months.
Okay.
It's the persistent post-concussion symptoms that are very similar to visual stress, and often that vertigo, the post-trauma headaches, the visual sensitivities and the intermittent blurring and things like that can be helped with what we do at Opticom with filters and light management and things like that.
All right, well, let's talk about what you do at Opticom.
Okay.
Let's get into it.
So,
when somebody has a concussion and they need to get some help.
modifying the environment, modifying the light is one thing. So getting rid of the fluorescent lights and putting in specialized LED lights. Looking at the color of things. You may be more comfortable in a purple environment or a red environment. Modifying your environment to be in those comfortable colors. Moving things like patterns out of your visual environment. And this is important with the persistent symptoms, but also early on in a concussion. You say get off screens. The reason is screens are light, they're pattern, they're movement. Those are the triggers to visual stress. If you can go on a screen that doesn't have movement or flicker or color, then that can help. And we do have tablets and monitors that are made out of, they use e-paper technology. So instead of looking at LCD screens, you can look at a very large Kobo book to look at your emails and things like that. So that's very helpful. But the best thing is to filter the environment. So right now we're in a very lit environment.
Yeah.
So we use something, it's called an intuitive colorimeter. It's a medical device that was designed by the Medical Research Council in the United Kingdom. This device takes our clients through the full spectrum of color, the saturation of the color, and the intensity of the light. And this device, it's like going to hearing testing and going through all the spectrum of sound to decide what sound we need to filter. We go through the full spectrum of light to determine which color to filter. And it could be a combination of pink and rose. It could be a combination of blue and turquoise. It could be any combination of colors to get to a filter that you wear as glasses. Now, these are a prescription pair with a custom turquoise color.
Let me try them on. I'm curious.
Well, they're not your prescriptions.
They're not. Okay, am I not allowed to put them on?
No, you can put them on, but they're not your prescription.
Wow.
So it's the same idea with color. That may not be your color prescription either.
Right.
So for some people, they have prescription glasses, but they don't want to wear their filter all the time. Like a lawyer won't want to wear these in court. She might want to just put on her filter when she gets out into the hallway. This is great because you don't have to modify the lights. You don't have to ask people to turn the lights off. You don't have to remove your patterned artwork in your home or office. You can just wear your filter. And there are 100,000 different colors that we can identify using our intuitive colorimeter. So it's not just rose, it's not just green, it's not just blue. There's any number of colors. And with the concussion market specifically, the people that we see, they are very precise with their color. They're so precise, just turning the dial just one notch and they'll be like, no, now everything's moving again. But when we get their color, they cry, they hold their heads and go, they don't have their headache anymore. All of a sudden it's gone. So.
Amazing. Well, after the break, Karen's going to share some strategies and other treatment options that may help if you or someone you know has received a concussion. Back in a moment. Welcome back to Real Talk. We're talking about concussions on this show, and I've got Karen Monet with me to share her top tips for those who have been diagnosed. So where would you suggest that we start if we have recently received a diagnosis of a concussion?
All right. Well, it seems like most people who've received a concussion or think they have go to the emergency room. And that is really to rule out serious trauma. So bleeding on the brain, skull fracture, and that sort of thing. And they're ruling that out as far as keeping you in the hospital. Then they'll be sending you home and say, contact your family doctor. And the family doctor is a great start. It's a great place to go because you need to have a baseline. You need to have a start point. Here's how we feel today. You may feel differently tomorrow and a week from now, but at least you have a start. And your doctor can understand this is what we're dealing with and start to think about where they might want to refer you out. Because your family doctor isn't going to treat your concussion. They're going to help identify the symptoms you're suffering and send you to the specialists that might help you from there. So that's a good place to start. If you're looking for information, and this is wonderful because this summer, the Ontario Neurotrauma Foundation released their third version of the guidelines for concussion and acquired brain injury persistent symptoms, what to do in a case of a concussion. So these guidelines are very detailed. They talk about evidence-based therapies that they support, and there's research supporting the kinds of things that you should do if you have a concussion and if it's persistent.
So is that open to the public?
Absolutely. It's open to the public. There are two versions. There's the medical version, which is very research-oriented and big words, and there's the guide for families.
And where do we find it?
It's at neurotrauma.org. I think that's what it is. Yeah, I'd have to look it up.
Google
it's Ontario Neurotrauma Foundation.org, I think would be the best way. But Google it and you'll find the guidelines. You'll find the section for parents and families and the section that if you want to get right into the research and into the details, you can do that as well.
Excellent.
Yes. So that's a good place to start. The thing about a concussion, and you were talking about this earlier, there are so many different therapists you can go to. There are so many different rehabilitation specialists. You've had a concussion. How are you going to remember all this? You can't even read the material because the concussion makes it difficult for you to look at those patterns that we talked about, which is in text. So you need to find someone on your team. You need to hire a coach. You need to get a family member who's willing to put up with helping you through this.
Yeah.
You can also hire a case manager. And that's usually when you get into more of the longer term problems where you have someone who helps you manage all the different therapists you're going to be seeing, all the specialists.
Okay, but if you're somebody that has received a concussion and you've got a best friend, you can say to them, can you please come with me to my appointments because I'm not going to be able to remember everything.
Coming to the appointments. When we're doing our assessments, we always ask that someone come with them. And we even get if the referral came from an occupational therapist, we ask the occupational therapist to come in for two reasons. One, to learn about what we do and to see what a difference it makes on the spot with their patient. The other one is because, yes, it's hard to remember. There's so much information. It's so overwhelming. And when we're testing them, we're actually aggravating them. So we're making them even more uncomfortable because we want to find out what makes them uncomfortable so that we can make them not uncomfortable.
Right.
And that's part of our testing. But for booking those appointments and getting to all the different specialists, it's really helpful to have somebody on your team.
Yeah, on your team. And I imagine even driving to those appointments, for a lot of people, driving is an issue, I know.
A lot of people can't drive. The clients that we see are on that severe end of the spectrum. Wow. So they'll either have, through their insurance company, will pay for a driver. They'll have different transportation services that'll allow them to come into the clinic. We've had Uber and taxis, but it's great if a family member or a friend or some support person can come with them.
Now, we live here in Canada. Talk about the insurance piece, just because I think a lot of us think that there's no coverage at all if we have suffered a concussion.
For motor vehicle accidents, we've been supported by them for about a little over 2 years now, where if you've been in a motor vehicle accident, we can work on a treatment plan and propose that to the insurance for them to cover the costs of our assessment and all of the assistive tools we've talked about. And great news, in the last few weeks, the disability insurance, so Great West Life Disability, has shown an interest in what we do, and they're referring people to us. But that's something that you have to work out through your employer and your disability insurance, so it's not that common. Mm-hmm. And the other one is WSIB. We've had a lot of people come to us, school teachers with injuries on the school ground, people working and that have WSIB coverage, have paid for it out of pocket. But WSIB is starting to recognize that we're making a difference. We're getting people back to work.
Right.
The main things that stop people from getting back to work post-concussion, it's the lighting and it's the computer screens. So if we can provide them with tools to change the lighting and alter the computer screens, we're getting people back to work.
Yeah. And
the filters, the glasses are one thing. We had, I think it was a disability consultant that said, yeah, 2 weeks after receiving our lenses, his client was back at work.
Wow.
So it makes a big difference.
Does that mean the client is back at work concussion-free? Like, can these help us speed up the healing process of a concussion?
What it is it addresses the symptoms. The filters and changing the light and colored therapies and software, they help manage the concussion symptoms. So the concussion may still be there and they may be dealing with it, but these are tools that help the triggers to their discomfort be less. So we receive referrals from all areas of concussion rehabilitation, from the optometrist, vision therapy specialist, neurologist, psychologist, excuse me, occupational therapist, physiotherapist. They're all in front of people who suffer from the symptoms of light sensitivity, pattern sensitivity, movement sensitivity, and screen intolerance. So they're seeing these problems and they're realizing, okay, this is a concussion symptom, but there are some tools and techniques that we have available now that we know about that can help reduce them.
All right, so we've talked about the guidelines, we've talked about getting a case manager. What are some other tips that you have for people that get a concussion?
See an optometrist. Okay, we see a lot of people that call us, they call us and they complain, oh, I'm having vision issues. Well, when was the last time you saw your optometrist? Because we will not see anybody until they've seen an optometrist. And specifically for our concussion clients, they've had a post-concussion vision assessment. Very important, because we want to deal with what's happening here forward, what's happening with the eyes. If you've had a concussion and you're wearing progressive prescription glasses from before your concussion, you may have a hard time dealing with that change of prescription from distance to reading. Your brain may not be able to tolerate. You may have to get a new prescription. So see an optometrist. Take a look at your prescription. Take a look at what's happening with your eyes, the muscles in your eyes. You've received an injury to your head, so maybe there's some issues with your muscles that are managing your eyes. So that's where vision therapists can come in and help train those muscles, like a physiotherapist for your knee, vision therapist for your eye muscles and your eye teaming and that kind of vision thing. Again, talking about the head, what if when you had your concussion, something happened with your jaw? You may be having headaches that you're not relating to some kind of injury to your jaw, or maybe your teeth, maybe they clenched and you have a cracked tooth that you didn't think about. Go to the dentist, get that kind of thing ruled out. I'm kind of talking about the senses, right? Vision, hearing. Hearing is another one. People who have a concussion are often very sensitive to sound. So go and see a hearing specialist. Go and see someone who does we do visual processing, but auditory processing. Someone who specializes in that, because they may be able to give you tools and techniques to manage your sound sensitivity. So sound, sight, talked about the dental. When you've had a concussion, you've often had some kind of damage to your neck. A whiplash often comes hand in hand with a concussion. So see someone who specializes in musculature. So your physiotherapist, maybe even a chiropractor to work out what's going on with your spine and your physicality that way. So several different therapists there. There are a lot of post-concussion clinics that have teams of specialists. So if you were to go to one that says they were a concussion specialist team, you would have physical therapy, physiotherapy, occupational therapy, and because you talked about depression, they're often, if you've had persistent concussion symptoms, you're often frustrated, you get depressed, it's affected your work, it's affected your family. So these concussion clinics also have psychotherapy, cognitive behavioral therapy, things that help you with managing the mental aspect of having a concussion.
And would people need to be referred from their family doctor to these concussion teams?
No. Sometimes yes. I think it might help if your family doctor was part of that whole program and you kept them up to date. But you can go to these concussion clinics and they will do an initial assessment. They'll bring you in and they often have a battery of tests they take you through to rule out or identify different issues that may have resulted from your concussion.
And I think the thing is, like we've been talking about this whole show, that every concussion is different.
Absolutely.
So we really can't just put everything into one box and say, this is the protocol. It really has to depend on the individual. So if they're dealing with hearing issues, starting with those auditory tests. If they're dealing with the visual stress right away, start with the optometrist. And then,
Yes, that's very true. The optometrist will identify the refraction correction and the vision therapy needs, and we work with them. So if a vision therapist identifies prisms are necessary to bring in the visual field, And like if you're locked in that focal vision, the prisms might bring in the information from the ambient vision. And we can help, you might see someone who's going to help you with posture, again, to help open up that visual field. And then we can work with a filter and that prism to help you be comfortable with all that extra information that's coming in. So it's really a team effort, the community getting together to look at all the different modalities. And it's great if I know what my client has gone through, because I can then check off those things. If I see somebody with vestibular issues, I can try and address those with filters to make sure it's not a perception issue. But then I can say, have you asked your physiotherapist about benign positional vertigo? And if you haven't, and you're having vertigo, then you need to have this looked into. So there, as we all learn more about what each other do, we can start to identify possible additional therapies that our clients can have done.
Well, and what is amazing about you, and the reason we met, is because at the Healthy Brain and Body Show, you really bring together all of these amazing people that have different therapeutic approaches, and you bring everybody together so that we know where we can start, or we can at least figure out what steps to take depending on what we're going through.
That's something I always wanted to do. Was it's not just about what I do that can solve someone's issue. It's a part of the whole. It's a piece of the puzzle. And if we can get all these different pieces together and make this beautiful finished piece of work, a healed individual, then that's fantastic. But if some of the pieces are missing, at least if I know, well, you know what, you might find that piece over there, then we can have a more full recovery.
What I love so much about what you do and how you do it is what a collaborative approach. You know, I really appreciate that in what you do, because you really are looking at it and saying, and looking at the person as a whole person, and you're not saying that this one thing is going to fix your problem. You might have somebody come in and, you know, yes, of course they get into new lenses, but they need, you know, the help with the neck. They need the help with, they need to get to a dentist to figure out why the headaches are persistent, if, you know, headaches continue after they sort of deal with
like
the
if you've checked off all the possible reasons for this happening and there's still some empty check boxes, then that's where we can get better full recovery. We didn't talk about nutrition. That's an important one. I know you've done a full show on nutrition, but when you're trying to heal the brain needs food. It needs the right food. It needs the right ingredients to rebuild. And so nutrition is a big one.
And healthy fats are so key, aren't they, when it comes to concussion?
The other one was cognitive behavioral therapy. Oh, and neurofeedback. Okay, that's another one that you don't hear a lot about, but I've had clients who've seen great success with it. And it's the idea of teaching your brain to act differently. And you can, by having this neurofeedback, you're sending signals to the brain as you start to get off track. And I'm going to be learning about this in about a month and a half. I'm taking my son, who has visual stress and wears his turquoise glasses. He's had concussions, but he was born with it. And we're going to take him to get a quantum EEG to see the brain mapping of what's happening when he's wearing and when he's not wearing his lenses.
Wow, that'll be amazing to see.
Yeah, it's going to be fun.
I think we have a minute left. What else do we need to cover?
You talked about the Healthy Brain and Body Show, and I think that's something that's a great place for people to go in the spring to learn more about concussion and what kinds of things they can do for therapies and rehab.
And that's here in Ottawa.
Yes.
So that means that you get to come back and be surrounded by all of these amazing people that are now in your referral network that you've really created. I really feel like you have hand-selected all of these people that are now in this referral network, that for anybody who is suffering, or if parents have a child who's suffering, now we have a place that we can go, where we know that we can talk to you and you're going to say, listen, you can also go to these other places.
Right.
It's amazing.
It's not just about what we do, it's about what we can all do
Well,
together.
Again, it's what we can all do together, because we are talking about a whole person. It's about collaboration and collectively coming together to help heal that whole person. We have 30 seconds left. Tell me one more thing about concussion that you think is important for people to know.
Well, de-stress. Okay? Stress can lead to discomfort, and yoga therapy, mindfulness is so important. Be positive, positive thinking. Yeah, I'm going to get better. Think positive.
I love that. Thank you so much for being
very
here.
welcome.
When we come back, I'll share my final thoughts. Back in a moment. I dedicate this episode to anyone who has suffered a concussion. I'm overwhelmed by the number of people I've met in the last few years who have been affected. My dear friend Karen suffered one when she tripped while running over 2 years ago. And my 13-year-old niece Olivia fell out of bed and hit her head and suffered a concussion last year. Their roads to recovery, like so many others, haven't been easy, and I wanted to spend this hour highlighting the importance of this topic. It is my sincere hope that something you've learned today will help you or a loved one on their road to recovery. And if nothing else, I hope we will all practice greater kindness and compassion towards those suffering. Because there are often no obvious symptoms, stigma and shame surround those with post-concussion symptoms, which only drives them deeper into feelings of worthlessness and powerlessness and fear that life will never be the same again. But what we've learned today is that there is so much hope. Life may not ever be the same as it was before the concussion, but different doesn't have to mean bad. As my first guest, Lisa Cara, shared, her life completely changed because of it, but she wouldn't change a thing if she had to do it all over again. There were lessons inside that she needed to learn, and because of the approach she took, she is living proof that healing is possible. Thank you to Lisa and to Karen Monet for sharing some powerful strategies people can use when they have a concussion and for explaining some of the ways concussions can be treated. Until next time, I want you to remember one thing, that no matter where you are and no matter how it feels, you are never, ever alone. See you next time.